So welcome, Rebecca Grugan. Many of us know you, but for those who don't, tell us your Montessori story. How did you discover Montessori initially?
11 years ago, I had my son, and my neighbor gave me a book, gave me the book Montessori Madness, and I took it over to Fiji and I read it in about a day and a half. It's a small book, so it's possible. And I was just like, well, this is logical and this needs to be everywhere. And why haven't I heard of this before? So I came back. I was doing research while I was over in Fiji, and I came back to Brisbane. 3 months later, I started I Am Montessori, got a venue where we did parent-child classes. So in Australia, we call something similar like playgroup. Hired a Montessori-trained teacher, educator, and that is how I Am Montessori started. I then went to China to bring materials in so it was more affordable for families, because at that point it wasn't as accessible as it is now. And we really wanted people to be able to do it at home because they were on waitlists for early childhood centres at that point. There wasn't as many as there is now. And so then I started selling retail materials. We then started a family daycare scheme. So over here, that is where an educator sets up at their home and has 1 to 4 children, or if including primary age, after school care, 1 to 7 ratio. So we started family daycare and did that for a few years, and they were all Montessori educators around Brisbane. And then we got a phone call and somebody asked, can you help me set up a Montessori early learning center? And I said yes, and I had no idea what I was doing, but worked it out and hired the team who did know what they were doing, because my whole goal is as many children to have access to Montessori as possible, and to be as independent from as early as possible to as long as possible. So that first center was about 9 years ago, and then I helped other centers as well, and then I got my first center 7 years ago at the end of this month. And that was really a really great experience to set up and do it how we wanted to. And we won National Service of the Year 18 months after opening, against mainstream centers as well. So we then started providing training for centers as well, because we found that was really inaccessible and in a flexibility, cost-wise, all of those scenarios. So that's sort of the journey. And then I have been on a goal my goal is first breath to last. So Montessori from birth all the way to end of life. And so at the moment, the last 18 months, I've been working on Life by 8, which is my company that has Montessori at the foundation of its framework. And we work with teenagers all the way up to retirement. And eventually the goal is that I have a purpose-built aged care facility that is boutique and is all Montessori and focuses on dementia and Alzheimer's in the work that we do there. And so that's sort of the decade vision. So at the moment, I've got 2 centers that are my own. I work with other centers to support them, either set up or they've already set up and they may need help in different ways. And then, so Life by 8 is the primary at the moment, the primary driver, working with, they're sort of our reactive work, I'll call it. So when I started a decade ago, when those children were 0-3, including my son, I always wanted to have a solution so that the work I was doing was proactive for them, so they would have Montessori the whole way through their lives. And so those children at the moment are sort of 9 to 12. And so we set up the primary school as well. And eventually I was able to get it into a public school system, which is what I always wanted. So it was affordable for parents and people. And that has been the last 4 years. And then I was able to move on to Life by 8 and keep doing the reactive work around the valorization of teenagers and sort of that cycle 4 and upwards, as well as educating parents and working with parents and businesses to really look at Montessori from an aid to life perspective, beyond the classroom, beyond the 4 walls. So that's sort of where Life by 8 is at the moment. That's where I Am Montessori is at the moment. And currently the thing I'm working on right now is an AI coach, which basically Montessori is in there, and you can ask Frank, how do I present the pink tower, and it will bring up the instructions and everything for you. But it can also ask, it's a life coach. So to me, with Life by 8 and the work I do, I am a life coach, and so is my team. However, what we do is Montessori. So it's taking away the word Montessori to be a barrier, and it's using life in all of its 8 pillars to human wellness, and Montessori is at the absolute foundation of all of that.
Wow. Knowing you, Rebecca, I have no doubts that you will get there in 10 years or less.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that drives you to get all this done?
It just makes logical sense for humanity, and you can get caught up in the political side of Montessori, and whether you're AMI trained, whether you're AMS trained, whether you're Building Futures trained, who are awesome. They're Southeast Queens, well, they're national, but they're local to me as well. Whether it's through courses through Montessori Australia, wherever it is, I don't actually care where your piece of paper comes from. I actually care about your Montessori heart. And so for me, Montessori is the way we help humanity become deeper, stronger, connected, where we can collaborate instead of compete, where we can change the absolute essence of what it means to be human and what we all fundamentally want, which is to be seen, to belong, and to be heard. And so that is actually the driver in everything that I do. And Montessori has always been, since I first read that book, has always been that for me. It's not just about the 4 walls, which I feel a lot of people get stuck at.
Speaking about Montessori Madness, and I also love that book, and Trevor, I knew Trevor when I lived in the States and worked with him. However, some people say that book is too aggressively Montessori, that it really trashes traditional education. What do you think? Is that a good way to convert people to Montessori?
Well, it converted me. And I didn't really have that bad of an education, to be honest. I didn't finish school. I left home at 16. I think I finished grade 11 and started like a week of grade 12, and I was in school going, this is pointless, because this is not, I can learn more working. I can learn more on the job. And it felt so much a waste of my time. And so for me, Montessori Madness may seem like it trashes traditional education. And to be fair, traditional education needs to be trashed, because it is actually that. And so where I feel like we get stuck in this world when it comes to Montessori versus mainstream and all of those sort of things is that perfectionist of believing that it's about being the Montessori perfect, how Maria had it 100 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever. And realizing that the world's moved on and we're moving faster and we're innovating and things change. And I do fundamentally believe that if Maria was still here, she would be experimenting and she would be inventing things and going with what's happening with humanity, because that's what she did. And so mainstream education has gotten so far behind, and it takes so long to make a decision. And we're at burnout because we've also got the most underparented generation of parents at the moment who have all this information that they have access to and are overwhelmed by it all. But they also were the people who had parents working more than any other generation before. So they're stuck, they're burnt out. And so all of a sudden teachers and educators are taking on the parenting work as well, because we've got parents who are set up working full-time, 2 parents just to survive, because that's what society created. And we're at burnout point. And so for me, I don't even remember the initial question you just asked me because I went on a rant, but I would say the difference is right now, humanity matters more than the academic results of anything. And Montessori, out of anything that I've ever come across, anything that I know, is humanity, is what the world needs. And so that is the answer to the question that I don't remember you asking me.
Well, it was about trashing traditional education. And, you know, really Maria herself had no qualms about trashing traditional education. She didn't mix words at all. You know, there was one analogy she used about how children in a traditional classroom are like butterflies pinned to a board. And there were so many other great quotes about that she used. And I think that really captured the attention of parents at the time when she was living, because parents know this. They see their children's experience and they know this. And that book, Trevor's book, I think has been it's been very successful among the parent community. And actually Montessori Australia has just republished it. We've changed the name to Montessori Magic with Trevor's permission, because yeah, I asked him, why did you call it Montessori Madness? You know, it was a little bit and he said, yeah, it was a mistake. I wish I hadn't done that. But it was a long story about how he got to that title. But anyway, we've updated it. There were some figures in it that were 25 years old and needed to be updated, and I wrote a new foreword and so on.
Why did you use the word magic when Montessori has what it has about fantasy?
Because it can seem like the results of Montessori can seem like magic, can seem, you know, when Montessori it works well, the results are like, wow, how did that happen? But also that it's a word that has the same kind of ring to madness, but the opposite meaning.
It's got a positive connotation.
So
is that available on the website to buy?
It's going to be available in the end of October, and then going forward. So we'll be published by Montessori Australia. But Trevor, his kids have aged out of Montessori, and he's sort of moved out of the community, and he doesn't do any lecture tours anymore. So he was quite happy for us to take that over and republish it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Rebecca, what have been some of the notable challenges that in your life as a Montessori educator?
Other Montessorians?
Really? How so?
The way that I understand what it is to be a Montessorian and to love Montessori and to serve humanity, I feel like that's not how Montessorians treat each other when it comes to the adults in any of the spaces. I fundamentally believe it's getting better. And I know that Maria Montessori didn't mix words, and I'm also known for being relatively direct. And it's almost like we need the older generation to sort of dissipate so that humanity can come together. So, you know, I don't ever want to talk about anybody like dying off, but it's almost like that needs to happen, because that dinosaur view of you are only a Montessorian if you are AMI trained is incorrect. And I've met AMI people who are horrible humans, and I have met non-Montessori people who are horrible humans, and I have met amazing AMI people, and I have met amazing non-AMI people. It's the freaking Montessori heart. It's so simple. But for me, I remember my first experience a decade ago. Somebody had said to me at the conference, and they're like, if you want a seat at the table, you need to go and do AMI training. I said, why the fuck would I want a seat at your table? You guys move so slow. If anything was actually going to change, it would change. And I don't want to be stuck by anybody's opinion on making that change, because 1, can't trademark it. 2, it's free world. 3, I'll do what I want because I want to serve humanity, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I don't believe I need to be here for any ego, for any of that sort of stuff. I'm just here to create. It's the same as when I created, I'm a for-profit center. Like, my centers are for-profit. The thing is that they're for purpose. And I needed to create for-profit so that I could do the work non-for-profit without people like, and Vicky's on here, and she's one of the people that I mentor my life, like the business side of, is you need to have the profit to be able to do the things like serve on Montessori boards, to be able to create and make the movement to be able to set up public schools where you don't get any money. The for-profit, non-for-profit battle is just as bad as AMI or something else training. They're going to be, AMI are going to be Kodak. They're going to become irrelevant if you don't innovate and change and actually understand and make sense of where the world is actually at. And so for me, the adults in the Montessori world are the thing that has been the hardest part.
Where do you think that comes from, that behavior in the Montessori community? Like,
not just Montessori.
why is it that, not just Montessori, but particularly in Montessori, where we don't, because we're trained to treat children with absolute respect at all times. Why can't we treat adults the same way?
Because it depends on, so if you pay $20,000 to do an AMI certificate, you are going to want people to know that you have the best, most expensive training in the world. And so ego gets in the way. And it's just, it's a trickle-on effect that I feel like that culture is slowly dying. And I've been to, Prague was my first International Montessori Congress and just did Bangkok. And I would say that Bangkok definitely was more open than Prague was. So there is slow progress happening in regards to acceptance of people who are not AMI or non-AMI trained. But it's in any philosophy, in any, I mean, I know it happens in RSL, I know like return serve, like veterans, it happens in religion, it happens all over the place. We're humans and we have ego, and people want or feel like they need power, and currently that's just how it is. In a group like this, you have power over instead of power with. And I do feel that we have the next generation of Montessorians coming through who are all about power with instead of power over, and not accepting being under somebody else's ego, under somebody else's power. And people, that gets disrupted because people don't like that if it's been different for decades beforehand. So for me, it's not just a Montessori thing, but it does come into play. If you're going to invest 20 grand into training, you are going to wave that piece of paper around like it's a flag.
So if we take a step back from there, maybe, so my theory, I'll run by you, see what you think. My theory is that it comes from so I don't see this as just a fault of people, but more of as a result of the structure of training in Montessori, particularly AMI training. So, for example, back in the day when Maria was alive, there was only one place to get training, and then in the 50s, she with Margaret Humphrey and what was her name, Phoebe Child, opened St. Nicholas program in the UK, which eventually became independent of Maria and AMI. And then you had Nancy Rambush starting the American Montessori Society in the 1960s. And so you have, because Maria couldn't meet the demand of training in the world, you have these other groups starting, right? And that's the case today. So maybe a better outcome would have been for AMI to rise up a level and say, okay, we can't meet all the demand for training, but here are our standards. No matter where you train, if you meet these standards, you can work in our schools, you can go to our conferences, you can call yourself a Montessori person, right? A Montessori teacher. And then, but what happened instead was AMI closed ranks, and they said, if you train with us, then you're a Montessori. And if you train with them, we don't really want to know you. You can't work in our schools, you can't go to our refresher courses, and you're not really a Montessorian. And
that just mirrors Christianity, religion, where they separate off into different versions of a religion. It's happened a million times. It's what humans are going to do when we go off in tribes and villages.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, I think that it's a result of human relationships. So the way people think, I think, can be the result of the way relationships are set up. And the way AMI training is set up is more like a medieval guild. So, trainers are handpicked and they take years and years to train. And then they have to run their own life. their own business, right? And that's the way they make their living. And so it's they become very protective. And because the AMI board is a large number of them are trainers, that system is protected. And so it not only doesn't produce enough trained teachers in the world, but it protects that idea that we're the only source of AMI, authentic AMI knowledge. That's my theory.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, that's not what I see as the message anymore. And I feel like there is a change happening over and over, because there's people who are realizing, like, if they don't change, it's going to become irrelevant. And so I do believe that that is changing. And I do believe that most humans, like, I have a fundamental belief that people are doing the best they can with the resources they have at the time. So by having that, no matter where you're training, no matter what we're talking about. So even like when we were talking about Montessori versus mainstream, teachers are limited to what they can do, and their results and their barriers in mainstream are done basically by what the principal down and what those KPIs are. And you've got to adjust to the hierarchy that exists in the system that you're in, and any system, whether it's health or social services, those sort of things, anything with hierarchy is going to be influenced by the human above. And when you have a society where things are, the economy is run in the way that we run it, yeah, people are going to protect their livelihood. But I also do believe that they're fundamentally doing it with the best intent, and to protect that, not just out of their own protection of who they are and what they need, but also what they believe in. And I feel like the only way to really respect that is to all be able to see how we see the child, or how we're all trained to see the child from a Montessorian lens. And we have to take that just out of the four walls and actually see each other as that, and with that mindset and with that heart. And so, like, Amy Cohen, she's an AMI trainer here in Australia, and I was speaking at a conference, and I mean, it's recorded, so it's public knowledge, but I said to her, like, I used to not like her, and I said that to the room of 120 people, but Amy and I made the joke at the next conference we're together, she's going to wear my clothes and I'm going to wear hers after, because the thing is that when you get to the human, when you build the rapport, we aim and get trained to build the rapport with the child. And I always continue to develop outside of just Montessori, because I can then, I apply a Montessori lens. So I've just completed NLP, neuro-linguistic programming training recently. And so much of that is Montessori, in the way we speak to the child, the way and the beliefs that we view the child, all of those things are there. And so for me, when I speak to somebody and build that rapport, and we keep those fundamental beliefs of what Montessori is and how to view people, the breakthroughs happen for the adult in front of us, but for our relationships. And so it's about honesty without the judgment, without the empathy, and actually compassion more than anything else. So I believe that we got there because we're human, but the thing is that we can make a choice and change. And we are doing that bit by bit. And we are doing that. It's a long-term game. This is not an overnight thing. So it's just about choosing and starting each day the same way we would see a child who might be diverting from expected behavior, and we just start the next day new. It's a brand new day. It's a blank canvas. And so start seeing everybody in the world from that Montessori lens. Your life changes when you do. Absolutely. The positivity, the optimism.
Yeah, well said. So you've just done NLP training. You run several companies. You're a parent as well. Do you sleep?
Yeah, all the time.
How have you worked out the work-life balance thing?
There's no such thing as balance. You create and make decisions to actually have a life where you have the freedom to, when your children are sick or your children have sport or they need you, that you can be there. And when work needs you, or the center or what have you, you're able to be there. And one of the fundamental things I say to especially the teenagers that I coach and work with is who you choose to marry is the biggest decision you'll ever make. And I am fundamentally who I am these days because the last 14 years I've had an incredible husband who does do more around the house, who doesn't get stuck in ego and is okay and loves to do the stuff with the boys and does school pickup, and I do school drop off in the mornings. And we designed our life this way. And this is the thing, this is why Life by 8 works so extremely well, is you design your life. The decisions you make are up to you. So the work-life balance theory is incorrect in itself because we're looking for balance. And people see that as, you know, I work 9 to 5, so I work and then I play for 8 hours and then I sleep for 8 hours and that's my balance. There is way more depth to life than that. And if you set yourself up to only have those barriers, you're going to get stuck continually fighting yourself for balance. And so how it works for me is that I have an incredible team around me. They don't work for me, I work for them. And that's the attitude that I go in with. And I provide and I ask questions and I'm there when they need me to. And I got out of my own way by stop being okay with not being relevant. My centers can run without me in the day-to-day. And I needed to get past my ego years ago so that I can actually know that and trust that. And I believe that. And we are all, and I mean my 32 staff, and we're better for it. But as the leader of what I do, it is my responsibility to ensure that I'm doing the work on me so that I'm out of my own way and I don't put myself in the way of their growth just because my ego feels like it needs to be relevant. I need to be okay with being the fly on the wall, which is the goal of a Montessori educator.
Yeah, I was going to say that's so Montessori of you. Is everything,
Mark, everything. Montessori is a way of life. It is in everything. Yeah. This is the thing. We forget about we worry about the shelves and whether the material's getting used and if it's dusty and those 4 walls. And then we bitch about the people and our assistant not doing enough and who's training and I'm trained and she's not and whatever. But if you start actually living life the Montessori way, everything fundamentally shifts. So for me, it's life design, and I choose and have incredible people around me. And I know that most of the time, if there's a problem, I'm the one who's the problem.
So you've answered this already to a great degree, but what are some other desirable skills and talents do you think are required by a principal, a good leader? Or
well, firstly, the acceptance of if you are human, you are a leader. So whether you are 3 in a cycle one classroom and about to go up, you were a leader in the toddler community. If you are 6, if you are 4 or 5, you're a leader. You are a leader from birth, and how you choose to live your life is going to have impact on others. And so when you can accept that and know that you are leading somebody, whether you are doing it in a role with a job title under an email signature, or you are going out to play sport or going to have drinks with friends, you are leading because you are showing up and you are human. You are human, you are humanity. So fundamentally, firstly, actually accepting that you're a leader, whether you like it or not, you're going to lead because you're human. Secondly to that is knowing that it's okay and the goal is to become irrelevant. If you are not at the table where there are people who see you, so you need to work towards stop fitting in. Stop trying to fit into things and actually find where you belong. And so when you stop fitting in, you actually then really get down to the crux of it where you can be yourself completely and lead from that place, from that heart. And from that Montessori heart, you can then lead your team, lead all those around you, but ultimately you actually enjoy life and you love it. And that was the biggest leadership lesson for me. Vulnerability. Brene Brown's work is huge. And if you really dig and dive deep into it, so much of it is, again, Montessori, because Montessori is everything. And And her Dare to Lead work really shows and goes into leadership and the theories around being the shame and the guilt and those emotions. Shame, when you name shame out loud and you have people you can speak to, shame dissipates. And so empowering yourself to say, you know what, I'm not AMI trained, or I'm not this, whatever it is, the shame that you're holding, because it's an internalized thing. When you speak that out loud, you empower yourself to go, okay, that's okay, but I know what I'm doing is the best I can do with the resources I have right now. And you empower yourself, and in turn, you empower others around you. So really knowing that the work never ends, as in the work on yourself. And when you focus on yourself, self-care is not selfish. When you put yourself first and you dive deeper into what makes you happy, the little things and the big things, you bring joy to a classroom and you don't have to force it. And so when you don't have to force it, you can actually lead from a place. You're not just managing people, you're leading. You are being yourself, and therefore you are leading and you're seeing humans for who they are. And if you're doing that, you're actually able to address your team to meet them where they're at and what their needs are individually, as we would in a classroom, and as a collective energy when we're a team together.
Powerful words, Rebecca.
I'm full of them, Mark.
So I mean, you keep answering my questions before I ask them, but what other advice would you give a new, inexperienced teacher coming into the Montessori world?
So have they done a mainstream bachelor at uni and then going into Montessori classroom?
Either.
Okay. So if they are working in a Montessori center and they're studying at the same time, know that Montessori is a way of life. And when you are given theory, or when you're giving things to be, your assessments or whatever in your degree while you're studying, link it back to Montessori and see Montessori as a way of life. You don't need to get on the defense for Montessori or the defense on the other, because when you can see that your tutor or your lecturer is doing the best they can with what they have, that's what's in front of you. But you don't have to accept every piece of advice or everything that's given to you. And that's what we teach, or we guide children in an education. But what we forget as adults, as teenagers, is the ability to discern. People can tell us things and we can take that, and we have the ability to have discernment and go, I like this part, but I don't agree with that part. And I can adjust what I need or what I want to take on board from that. But you can empower yourself with that discernment and ask what you want and say what you mean. For those who are studying, because it's not too far gone, if you're coming into Montessori and you've had like a few years in like a mainstream classroom, or have just finished it and it's your first time in a Montessori setting, start as the assistant. Be okay if your assistant knows more in the classroom than you do, just because you have a bachelor or a degree or what have you. Have the ability to let go of the ego and to sit and observe where it's possible, but to accept that other people in that space with a different education maybe to you, that you might view as lower, that they actually know, and ask the questions and be respectful. Go into that classroom as you are new to it. Don't expect to know it all at once, and ask the questions. And for me, knowing that you are never going to know it all. You are never going to know it all, and it should never be an expectation you put on yourself or that other people put it on you, because the world changes so fast, even more so now with technology and things like that. And so when you allow yourself to realize that you are forever going to be the student, you're always going to be the learner. If you approach your team, if you approach your classroom with that attitude, you're going to get what you need. And because you have the confidence to ask a question, because your ego is not in the way of being worried about people seeing you not knowing everything, you are going to be able to be seen for who you are, and you're going to be able to take on knowledge a lot faster than if you let your ego get in the way.
Yeah, there's a famous, you reminded me of a famous quote I think it was Sadhguru who said something like certainty is religion. And if you really want to be, if you really want to know, then be okay with uncertainty. And that's what you're saying, bring that attitude to the classroom.
Absolutely. The person with the most flexibility wins, as an NLP presupposition and belief, is the more you think you have control, the more rigid you are, the less control you actually have, and the less success you actually have. And so the ability to be flexible, and this is why the work I'm doing with Life by Aid is so important right now, is we went through a collective trauma globally with COVID, and people didn't have control. And so for those who needed control and thought they had it, they lost it and didn't know what to do with that. And that has really affected and shifted people's mental wellness, people's emotional regulation, and we're still healing from that. And so getting the message out there that the more flexible you actually can be, the more successful you're going to be, not just in a Montessori classroom, but in life. And so really, really that rigidity is the thing that's actually going to hold you back from reaching your potential, not just as an educator or teacher, but as a human being.
What do you see as the biggest challenges faced by Montessori in Australia?
In Australia? Well, we're a small country. So firstly, that needs to be remembered. We don't need to have 700 different organizations trying to represent and advocate for the philosophy and pedagogy globally. Secondly, we have an opportunity as such a young country to really embed and embody what it means to be a Montessorian, and that's from true inclusion, which depending on what your belief systems were after the weekend's referendum, that inclusion is still extremely important, to see each individual for who they are, to be inclusive of all cultures, to see the classroom and the ability and the right that every child has to education. We have the opportunity as such a young, dynamic and vibrant country to really, really progress that. But I do feel outside of being a challenge, because I don't really talk about weaknesses or challenges, I look at opportunities for growth. And Montessori has an opportunity for growth in front of it, to really talk about Montessori as a way of life, not just a classroom, because that is the way you're going to get past ego. That's the way you're going to get past decision makers in government. It's viewing it as a whole life timeline, not just the education in the classroom, because there are so many people coming out with innovative ideas, and you look at it and go, that's fucking Montessori. That's 100 years old. It's like, why are we reinventing the wheel? And so for me, the opportunity for growth that we have here in Australia is to actually talk about Montessori as an entire life timeline and way of life, because we have incredible humans like Fran Kelly or Anne Kelly doing incredible work in the aged care scenario. And that stems from this amazing country. And we are known for our innovation. And so for me, that's where I come from, and that's the angle I have, because the more that I can show that Montessori is a way of life, the more we're going to have, the less we're going to have people pulling their children out after cycle 2 because all of a sudden they need to fit into the schooling system and high school's freaking me out and I need to do what everybody else does, because we actually build up and help people understand and make sense that there is a way of life. This is a way of life. It is not just the classroom. And this is what it means to be a Montessori, and this is what it means to actually view life this way long term. And so for me,
if Montessori is such a great idea, and why is it that only 0.5% of schools in Australia are Montessori after more than 100 years of history since Blackfriars opened? Why is it not more widely known in this country or around the world?
Because people's ego got in the way. We continue to still do that. It is, you are going to have, when you have governments in charge of, and in Australia especially, we have so many different states and territories which all have their own state governing body of the education system, but then we aim to have a national curriculum, which Montessori has its own approved one still, I think. I know that that's a really key point for the division at the moment. But the thing is that unless you actually talk about life as a whole thing, and if we stop siloing education, health, social services, justice systems, all of these things. We keep siloing it out, and then we have a government turnover the way that we do. Nothing is getting done, and we're viewing things separately. Whereas for me, when I talk to people and I explain what Montessori is, it makes so much more sense to them because it's overarching everything. It is a way of life. And so the more we talk about that, the more you're going to have people viewing it, because you're in a space where these silos no longer serve our country. They no longer serve our humanity globally. And we really need, and I believe a huge percentage of people want that. They want their children to be whole, well-rounded, contributing members of society. They also want it for themselves. But the thing is that fear, which ultimately all vibrations and all emotions come down to fear and love. Fear drives so much of the decisions that we make as individuals. And if we don't pay attention to what's around us in our external environment, that fear just continues to be driven home. And that is why Maria had to fight the way that she did for things, because that fear is what has made a lot of people money.
So how do we change this? How do we get the word out more successfully about Montessori?
Start with yourself and live Montessori the whole way through in your life. View your life, design your life from that angle, because if you're not doing it, how do you expect people to believe what you're saying? And so we can continue a divide, and we can continue to have our ego in check, and we can continue to have battles individual at schools, all these sort of things. Like, it's all over the place. It's not just in governing bodies and things like that. But if you live it, if you embody it, if you integrate it in all of the things that you do, then you actually start and upskill yourself. You can actually start to see, people can actually start to see what Montessori means without that word getting in the way, without that name and legacy getting in the way. And so I firmly believe that I live a Montessori life in the way that I view it, and the way that I translate it, and the way that I see other humans. And I understand and make sense that that's not everybody is going to see that. And so the way more people get to know about it, and I've said this for the entire decade that I have been in this environment, is we need people to understand what life can be. And life can be incredible and amazing. It just happens to be that life is lived, or what Maria created was a pedagogy and a way of life that serves beyond a classroom and brings joy, brings happiness, and you can live it in service of others. So for me, the more people that know about life lived this way, they will eventually be living Montessori, and then they will want that change for their children and for their children's children. And we get past the current issue we have with the block of the word Montessori.
Now, you were instrumental in bringing Montessori to Capalaba State College, a public school in Brisbane. Where do you see Montessori fits within the public school system?
Well, it's the same thing. You're going to have a division where you disrupt something. You've got parents who want it, and it's great. But when you have to advocate beyond just your classroom, and you have to advocate why Montessori matters, you've got to go in with compassion, knowing that when you are going into a school where half might be Montessori, half might be mainstream, you've got these mainstream teachers who feel like they have to defend the way that they do things. And so if you're going in defending Montessori and they're going in to defend that, and then each person doesn't really understand or can't make sense of what each other's doing, then you're going to have that battle. And that's culture. That culture is the hardest part to actually get through and break. And I can make sense that a Montessori culture in a classroom, when you start a new school, takes 3 to 5 years to actually create, whether it's an early childhood setting or a set school. You open a center, you cannot expect it to be Montessori from day one, as in culturally the whole way through. You've got new people together, you've got new spaces, new way of being. So I feel the block is going to be when we go in with that defense, instead of having choice for families, whether they want mainstream or Montessori. It's about choice. And that's what has been great to work with Lachlan at Capalaba, is because it is about choice. They have Montessori, they have mainstream, they have high capacity. There's all these different choices in education. And that's the thing, up until now, up until recently, we haven't had choice in Australia. You go mainstream, and then the choice was whether you went public or private. So then it became, is my child smart enough to get a scholarship because I can't afford the private school? And so you end up, it's not just a divide of Montessori and mainstream, you've got mainstream in private or public, and which one do I do? And all these different things. And the world is creating, the world we've created is division. And so for me, it's about seeing each human as they are, going in with Montessori heart, and really remembering that it's choice for children.
Beautifully said. We're coming up to the Montessori Australia National Conference in a couple of weekends in Sydney, and the topic of that is transformation of the adult. What do you see as the key to transforming the adult in Montessori training?
Get out of your own way, firstly. Stop avoiding so stop avoiding things, stop blaming, stop defending your actions, your choices, all those sort of things, and get to a point of actually accepting that your life is where it is right now, whatever that means for you, and that everything is all about the next choice, the right next choice for you. And so to transform the adult requires the adult, whether you're talking about Montessori or not, but it requires the adult to be in a place to be in of acceptance so that they can become the author of their life, so that the choices that they can make in the future, and that transformation comes, but the transformation only comes from acceptance. The caterpillar has to decide and accept that they need to go into the cocoon to come out the butterfly, to fly. And so it requires us to become accepting of where we are right now and have the compassion for ourselves and for others, accept that so that we can then see things with a different perspective and become the author of what we're doing moving forward, individually and collectively.
Some people see or say that there's a bit of a stigma around long daycare in Montessori. Do you think that long daycare makes it more difficult to do authentic Montessori?
What I say to this is, it's coming to acceptance that Montessori in a long daycare setting will never be what it is at a school that has children 9 to 3 or 9 to 12 and the same children 5 days a week. The expectations that people think that long daycare Montessori is worse or less than a Montessori cycle 1 where the children are the same every day is in itself a catalyst for division. Because the thing is that when I look at long daycare settings, Montessori is a way of life. So I look at it from that lens, not from whether there's a 3-hour work cycle that's going incredibly well and training teachers. All of that's important. But the thing is that if you view it from a Montessori lens and a way of life, you can actually see that these centers and these places, most of them are aiming to be as Montessori as possible. And they come with that Montessori heart. And to me, that is way more valuable than whether or not you're running a great, really quiet 3-hour work cycle somewhere in the day. Like, for me, there's that fundamental, it's like it gets forgotten. And we know that if you are working in an office and a new person starts, the entire culture can change. Every Tuesday, there might be one child who comes into the class and then 6 people all change the way they are that day. And then that child's not there on the Wednesday, and then they're normalized, or whatever you want to talk about it. That's human, that's energy. And so long daycare, we provide flexibility, opportunity for the children to have access to an incredible way of life. It is not just for the economy and parents working. And if you eliminate that, Montessori long daycares are incredibly powerful to change the world. And they are doing it. They are doing it. We are doing it. And so my take on that is, what do you think you're not doing right? What in that judgment is you? And I don't mean you, Mark, the person who says that. What in them, in that reflection, in that projection, why are they making that judgment? Getting curious with it.
Good answer. Do you think there are areas where Montessori needs to be updated to better fit the modern world?
The overarching belief to me is, if you look at the key Montessori principles and you have a look at what Maria was, from what I believe from her readings and writings, to create for humanity and peace education, and to see humans the way that they are, the materials are great and they work well. But the thing is, technology is here and it's not going anywhere. So how would she view it? And this is the thing, is that if you really get curious, if you view life with curiosity, which is what we're wanting to do in a Montessori classroom for children, if you actually view everything from that lens with the Montessori heart, then you're continually updating every single day. So in my opinion, yes, because I view life as, I only have this moment right now. So anything in the future, anything right now is going to be an update. It's just my next choice. So I can view a Montessori app from a lens, like an app online from a Montessori lens. Is there a control of error? Is there isolated concept? Is there freedom within limits? Is there, like, just, if you live life through a Montessori lens, everything is updated all the time.
Mm. So I think I know your answer to this, but who do you think has ultimate authority to update the Montessori curriculum and materials? Do you think it's that knowledge is owned by everybody and everybody has the right to tinker with it? Or do you think it needs to be done in a very particular way and protected, and update should be done by some central body of gurus who have
firstly, using the word protected will put it's almost like something needs to be protected, therefore we need to defend. And so the armor needs to be put down, and people need to be vulnerable to actually have that conversation. And for me, if you're going to have a nationally improved curriculum here in Australia, it does need to have a potential body of humans who sign up and to do it, and to create it and to update it. Yes, because if you have too many people involved, it loses its ability to actually have some limitation, which it's required to have freedom within limits and to meet the needs of governments to continue to have its national approval. So when it comes to who to have ownership, to be honest, Mark, I don't really care who has it. I just know that it needs to be a group of humans who all collectively have the one goal, which is to ensure that the more children can have access to Montessori education, and therefore continuing to ensure that it has its accreditation, which requires us to fit into a system here in Australia to keep its approval. So whoever does that, great. But yeah, if it's free for all, you will never be able to meet those regulations.
It's such a nice answer to a difficult question. I wanted to open it up to others. Does anybody have a question or a comment for Rebecca before we wrap up?
I've got probably 1,000,001 questions actually. Something that's sitting in my mind from a couple of things that you said centered around the use of technology. So I wanted to know what you thought was the purpose of utilizing technology in the classroom, particularly in the lower primary, which is obviously that's within my purview at the moment. Where does it fit into Montessori learning? How do you envision it being used in the lower primary?
So I take away the word fit in, and where does it belong? And it belongs as being an extension, a tool for research, a tool for photography, a tool for
creativity,
all of those opportunities. But even Minecraft, like there's a way to utilize Minecraft. Like he's cycle 1, but he knows all about mangroves because they have mangroves in Minecraft, and he creates worlds. And so then that extends to what he does in botany as well. So it's looking at those extensions. And I believe that in a Montessori setting, you can actually really there is so much opportunity for technology to be utilized and connected to the existing materials. However, there needs to be limitations. There needs to be freedom within limits. But usually how I view it is it needs to be an extension, not on its own.
I have some children who are have neurodiverse for all intents and purposes and do have special interests. There are a group of half a dozen boys, and they're primarily focused on all things war, which includes all the technology around war. And I see that they have a massive enthusiasm around research and acquiring knowledge and understanding in that topic. And yet, to me, it sits in complete antithesis to everything that I perceive to be peace education. So I'm trying to can't find another word, a balance between allowing them to engage in that research and to fulfill their needs to inquire and to discover, while also feeding in opportunities for them to think critically about
so
what they're so fascinated with. Yeah.
They play Fortnite?
I think one boy does.
So I'll use Fortnite as an example. So when something comes up like that, I will usually jump on and play the game or play whatever it is that's currently trending to work out what's being built into it that is maybe addictive, or what in it is, why are they wanting to play it, and
they're not really it's not about playing the games, it's about their fascination with war.
Yes. So the thing is, though, is that you can have the conversation with them about, how the different to the timeline of the wars that we've had globally, but also how we end up there, and then bringing that back to this, like a singular example of, it might be when they don't agree on somebody goes for Liverpool and someone goes for Man United, and so utilizing the concept of war as a whole and how people get to be against each other. When we look at grace and courtesy, and we look at communication and the language part of Montessori, how can you utilize those lessons using past war, but also how we can potentially end up in war, whether that's civil war or religious war or whatever it is. There's so many extensions that you can go, but tying the outcome of peace education into play. So I would look at their interests, and so if it's football or sport, they have the joke if they go to war when they're in a grand final and the two teams are against each other. Bringing it back down from this big ideal concept where there's guns and machines and all of that sort of stuff, and bringing it back down to using the grace and courtesy lessons to bring it back down to something where they can actually tangibly see themselves in.
Yeah, I think I've been wanting to bring home a little bit of a reality of what submarines and drones and all this new technology they're talking about that has an element of fantasy about it, because there is I don't want to throw them in the deep end as far as reality is concerned. I'd like to lead them to discover that for themselves, but I kind of feel I don't want to traumatize anybody.
So don't talk about the war itself. Don't talk about the Mark. I've got about 2 minutes left, just so you know, because I've got a client here. But Judith, bring it back to always wanting to serve the child where they're at and being as honest as possible, and that's where grace and courtesy is so powerful, and seeing Montessori as a way of life and that end goal. But you need for them to be able to relate it outside of that fantasy, or them role playing as if they were at war with things and current events, like not having to be so factual or about that, but you can bring it back to things like grace and courtesy. So even like camouflage, for instance, that's used in war, you can bring the whole camouflage back to even the lesson of what the difference between wanting to be seen and not seen, fitting in and belonging. All these different things, you can use all of these children's interests that they bring to the room and really bring it back to that peace education, that Montessori heart, that Montessori way of life.
Yeah, excellent.
I think maybe an aspect of what you're saying, Rebecca, is that when children do war play, they're looking around at adult society and they're trying to use that concrete play to figure out what's going on. They're trying
Yeah.
to work out what are adults doing there, and how does this work? How does this structure, these hierarchies work? Anyway, we need to stop. Rebecca, you're such an inspiration to listen to you. We can continue for hours talking. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It was great talking to you.
Thank you all for investing your time in listening to me rant. And I am on Instagram, I am on Facebook, I'm wherever you find my name. Just if you ever have questions, please reach out. I'm happy to give you my opinion, but keep doing the work that you're doing. It's incredibly important, but just remember yourself first. Put yourself first. Self-care is not selfish, and you can't continue to serve if you don't put yourself first.
Nicely said. All right, thank you everybody. See you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.